Hello, and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I get together and we go over the week's events in the Church of Scientology, legal cases, all that kind of stuff around that, based on Tony's reporting from his Substack. Hey, Tony, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Chris. As you can see, I'm not home. I'm in a hotel room in Pennsylvania. I've been tooling around on my bicycle, but I'm still keeping up on the news and keeping things going. So I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. And what a week this week. We had some very interesting things happen. The resolution of a few things have been going on for some years, in fact. So let's start with an answer to a question that I had actually kind of forgotten because it was a while back. There was a YouTube sensation coming out of London org. This was years ago. YouTube videos from Scientology staff members. Very unusual, very strange. And we all wondered, what's up with this? And we never really got solid answers until now. A lot of conjecture. Let's talk about this story. What was this?
Well, yeah, and it wasn't just YouTube, but I think you and I both noticed about, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago that the London org, the London staff was different. They were using social media. They were creating kind of like these young stars that we got to know, and there was kind of an it couple. They weren't really a couple, but they were in all the promotional materials. It was Charlie Wackley and Sandrine Mutu, and they just seemed vivacious and fun. And I thought, this is what the rest of Scientology just can't seem to do, is they do project an image of things happening there. Well, that's kind of gone away. You still see Sandrine once in a while. London still does some things a little bit more youthful and energetic than other orgs, but some of that has gone away. Well, Alex Barnes Ross has let me know that whole thing was his idea. He was young, he was a teenager, he was on staff, and he said, listen, we should be on social media. We should be promoting people. And he had the documents to prove it. That's what was really fun, is he said, Tony, I was going through my files and I found all these documents about, how we created the Facebook and YouTube stuff and how we got success stories to use in the social media and stuff, and just showed me all the different things that they were going through. And it was really fun to finally see, okay, yes, there was a concerted effort to make this happen. And he was saying that they knew if they asked for permission from the Office of Special Affairs, because, OSA is not only Scientology's secret police, but one of the things that OSA takes care of is public relations. And Alex said they knew if they went to OSA and said, listen, we have an idea to kind of increase our visibility, they never get permission. So they just decided to do it. And he said, we knew that as long as this resulted in more book sales, they could still yell at us, but they wouldn't change it, because that's a crime in Scientology. If something's succeeding, you can't stop it. Shutting it down would be a big problem. So they got going, and they got, they made Charlie Wackley a bit of a star, and Alex said it did result in more book sales. So that was fun. Like I said, I still see Sandrine once in a while, but you just don't see Charlie Wackley anymore. I did when they opened the Paris Ideal Org in April, and we were looking at photos of the event. I did spot Charlie in the crowd. He did go over there for that. And Alex says that he's like deputy executive director at the London org. He's still helping to run things, but he's decided to pull back and not be the visible face of the thing. But it's just fascinating to me because, Chris, like so many people like yourself, when you're in the Sea Org, you're operating in just complete anonymity as far as the public is concerned, as you're slaving away trying to make things happen. And it's just so unusual that these young staffers at London decided to take this chance. And I'm just glad that Alex still had those documents.
Me too. I thought that was so interesting of an insight into that whole thing. I'd remembered sometime last year, I think it was, that Alex had told me that Charlie had been promoted, and that's why the videos had gone down, is because he was now the senior executive in charge of the whole org. And that position that he's in is mainly the guy who really does run around the building all day demanding people get their ass in gear and get producing. So he probably really literally didn't have time to get onto the video screen anymore. But the wondering about, who is this guy? How is this happening? How is OSA not shutting this down? We all wondered. I had endless numbers of questions on my plate about this, and I had no answers because, I even commented one time on one of Charlie's videos and said we should talk. And he responded, but then he never emailed me. I was like, I'm so close to this guy. So I thought we might, make something happen there. But he's absolutely right. OSA's default answer is easy. No.
Yeah.
It's easy to just say no. No, we're not doing that, right? Because if you say yes, it brings all this, all this stuff in, and fear. And if there's one thing Scientology is, they're afraid. I mean, in terms of reach out. So it's so that was a very, very interesting, enlightening story. I was really happy to read that this week. And interesting how it did increase sales, and yet they dropped it. I wanted to comment on this. There's a really interesting bad habit that Scientology has. Organizationally, I noted this at the staff and Sea Org level in the 25 years I was there. You can't keep something going there. Every time you get something going and it looks like it's going, it gets cross-ordered. No, we can't do that anymore. We got to do this. And it's almost always from on high. The Scientology management is so out of tune with what's happening at the lower levels that even when young, bright spark staff like Alex and Charlie do get something going, top brass cuts it off. It's just a habit they have. And I've always thought that is part of the reason why their self-destruction is built in, Now we had a decision on Vesca Paris arbitration. This is kind of a big deal. What happened here?
Well, we've talked about this before, that Vesca and Gawain and Laura Baxter were Sea Org members who say they were terribly treated on the free winds. They sued basically for trafficking, and Scientology does what it does, and it pulls out these contracts they signed and said, you promise not to sue us. You can't sue us. You need to go to our internal religious arbitration. And Judge Thomas Barber reluctantly agreed, saying that his hands were tied, even though you could tell he was very concerned about whether these contracts were signed under duress or not. He's not allowed to look at that, he said, because according to a Supreme Court ruling, it's the arbitrator who decides. So last month, Vesca and her attorneys came back and said, look, there's a new Supreme Court ruling issued May 23rd called Coinbase versus Susky. And in it, they said that it now gives the judge the right to look at claims of duress or fraud regarding arbitration contracts, and that the Judge Barber should vacate his ruling, back up, and start over again, and this time consider those arguments about duress. Scientology responded and said, no, you're not characterizing that Supreme Court ruling correctly. This Coinbase says if there are multiple conflicting contracts, then the judge can take a look at whether there's any fraud or duress or other things. And in this case, there are multiple contracts signed by Vesca and the Baxters, but they're not conflicting. They all say the same thing. You got to go to arbitration. Right. That's what Judge Barber ruled this week. He said, yeah, it just does, that new Supreme Court ruling just does not match the facts in this case. So disappointing. I thought it was a good try by Vesca's parents or attorneys to get this, to try this reconsideration. Didn't fly. So where is it now? This lawsuit has been forced into arbitration. They can appeal that ruling, but only after they go through the arbitration. That's why Valerie Haney is going through arbitration in her case. She wants to get to the other end of the arbitration, whatever they award her or not. Then when her judge signs off on it, then she can appeal the ruling, forcing her into arbitration to an appeals court. So that's what Valeska and the Baxters are also facing. Now, of course, what Valerie's going through is horrible. They've already put her through 5 days of this torture, basically, just yelling at her and calling her a liar and going through her emails and stuff. It's all anything but actually arbitrating her, case. It's a joke. And, you know, Valeska's not going to want to go through that. However, I thought about it and I thought, I bet Scientology doesn't do that to Valeska and the Baxters. I bet they do a 1 day in and out arbitration and award them some token amount. Then they can go like they did with the Garcias years earlier, go back to the court, judge signed off on it, then Valeska and the Baxters can appeal it. Now, why would Scientology do a quick one with them? Because they know once Valeska gets the right to appeal the ruling, she'll be appealing to the 11th Circuit, based in Atlanta, very conservative court that's already upheld Scientology arbitration in the Garcia case. The reason they're putting Valerie Haney through so much hell is they never want to get to the end of that arbitration. They want her to give up in frustration because they know if they ever finish that arbitration, go back to the court, say, okay, we award her 10 grand. She doesn't want it. She wants to appeal instead. The judge signs off on it. Then Valerie can automatically appeal, but she will be appealing to the Second Division California Appellate Court, which has already shown that it is very skeptical about Scientology's arbitration. So I think that's why Scientology is stretching out her arbitration for so long, is they never want her to be able to appeal. Whereas with Valeska and the Baxters, I have a feeling they won't put her through so much torture and just get a quick arbitration done because they know that the 11th Circuit has already ruled for Scientology arbitration. Chris, the whole thing is just so screwed up that Scientology has figured out a way to make it extremely difficult for ex-Scientologists to sue Scientology for what happened to them in Scientology. The lawsuits that are escaping that trap, like Leah Remini's, she's suing them over what they're doing to her now after she left. Yeah, that one Scientology's having a harder time with. But, if you're suing for what happened, somebody pointed out to me, yeah, but Larry Wollersheim won. Lawrence Wollersheim sued in 1980. Yeah. He didn't finally win until 2002, 22 years later, when he got a check for $9 million. And I can tell you, he admitted to me himself, almost all of that went to his attorneys. So if you consider that winning, 22 years in order to get an award that your attorneys eat up. But that was before. Now it's even worse. Now ex-Scientologists trying to sue Scientology, this arbitration trap keeps, putting them in these impossible situations. I don't know. It's so frustrating, Chris.
It's incredibly frustrating. And we've vented about this in the past. I won't overdo it here, except to say, basically, this is their ace in the hole. This is their get out of jail free card. And this is their ticket to ride, right? This is their no fuss, no muss arbitration. And it kind of comes out a little bit like how sometimes diplomatic immunity is framed, It's like people can come into this country from other countries, do the most egregious things. And if they've got diplomatic immunity, there's nothing, it's like suddenly there's just nothing you can do about it. And you're just standing there. How is this possible? That is the world that we live in right now. And this is why SCOTUS and our court systems need a major overhaul when it comes to arbitration law. This is a fundamental flaw in our system that Scientology is exploiting. Let's be clear about that. And this was not, I don't believe it was intended that Scientology get a free pass. I don't think that's what the lawmakers intended in writing this. It's just that's how they have to interpret it. And we need better law. This is where our legislators are really letting us down. And this is why we need people to go to our government officials and our legislators and say, hey, this ain't okay with me. Until that happens, we're not going to see a change in this. So, all right. And I guess we'll see what Vesca and her team decide to
I haven't
do.
heard from her. I don't know what they're planning. It might not be worth going through arbitration because they
Right.
know that on the other side they got that 11th Circuit. So
Exactly. Exactly. It's not exactly like, oh, hey, I can't wait. I mean, yeah, after what Valerie's going through. Now, on the other end, we did have a legal victory this week in regards to a Scientologist and actual crimes being committed. What was this case about?
Yeah, David Gentilly is this Scientologist who's mostly associated with the New York org, wealthy donor. And he was convicted this week of running a Ponzi-like scheme, a $1.7 billion investment company, basically. And Jeffrey Augustine was on it from the very beginning, and he reported a lot about that case over the years. So when the conviction came down, I asked him if he could write up something about it for the bunker. He wrote us a nice summary of the case. And how he explained it was that what the government proved in this trial in Brooklyn was that they were making promises of a certain amount yield on investments, which you can't do because you can tell people if you invest with me, you're going to get a 10% return. Well, yeah, but there's risks involved. You can't guarantee that you're going to. But anyway, they said, okay, you're going to get 8% or 10% or whatever. And when it didn't happen, when it fell short, they borrowed money from new investors in order to pretend that those yields were happening. And so that's a lot like a Ponzi scheme. They said it was a Ponzi-like scheme, whatever. But yeah, you're taking money from people and giving it to others and pretending. Anyway, so he's facing 20 years in prison. Though the sentencing is in October, I think. But I don't think there was much Scientology in the case itself. I didn't go to the trial because I knew they wouldn't be talking about Scientology at all. But Jeffrey found some interesting things. Like, for example, at one point there was some controversy over who was going to be in control of the funds that were still there in that company. And one of the people who applied was Stephen Hayes, the notorious Scientologist attorney, who was the one who took the funds from the Cult Awareness Network and everything. So it's obvious that Scientology is very is watching this, is very concerned about what's happening with David Gentilly and his money. But there was another person convicted with him in this trial, and another person who had pled guilty before. I don't think either one of them are Scientologists. I hope I didn't get that wrong. Jeffrey will correct me. But listen. I take one lesson from this, Chris, and that is, why the hell would anybody trust their money with a Scientologist? Come on.
I'll tell you. I mean, and we can go back in history. I mean, you got Reed Slatkin, right? Who are those chiropractors who got busted a couple of years ago?
The Spina brothers, yeah.
Yeah, right?
Jay Spina, 9 years in prison.
Yeah, we see this kind of fraudulent, the welfare insurance fraud. What was that? That was also happening in California with Alfredi Johnson and the literacy program. And
that's right.
Guys,
that's right.
Right? This scammy stuff. That's
world's most ethical people, Chris.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Most ethical people on the planet. But I had to comment on one thing about this that is Scientology-like, or perhaps motivates it. And that seems to be this idea that every one of these guys has had, that they're just making it go right. They just gotta give themselves a little boost until their cow comes in, right? Their ship comes in, and it's right around the corner. So I'm just gonna make it go right and pay those investors and get that money. No, man, what you're doing is illegal. But in Scientology land, you're making it go right. And I think that's an attitude here. I'll connect that dot. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. But okay, now finally we get to our poster child for Scientology worldwide, Tom Cruise, and a couple of stories connected with this guy this week coming out of the Olympics. What's the story here?
Yeah, so I mean, Tom's been all over the Olympics, and
Yeah.
after the Olympics started, a really interesting story emerged that the morning, I think it was the morning of the opening ceremony, the French Minister of Culture held a secret ceremony so she could knight uh, Tom Cruise. He became a Knight of Arts and Letters, Chevalier. And this wonderful photo showed up of the Minister of Culture. She's pinning a medal on Tom, and he's wearing a polo shirt.
Right? I was like real
So,
formal.
so one of the questions people were asking, the guy's getting knighted in a polo shirt? What's going on? So
Right.
I wrote up an initial story about it, and then I reached out to my friend in Paris, British journalist Johnny Jacobson, who's been so helpful over the years with about Scientology in France. And he wanted me to know that there was this political background. France has gone through this whiplash where they had some parliamentary elections first go one way towards the right wing, and then a week later snap back to the left coalition. And so now everything's up in the air. President Macron has not, he's supposed to put in a new government, but he said he's going to wait till the games are over. So the Minister of Culture apparently is a far right or right wing politician who's only been the Minister of Culture since January, and any day now she's going to get replaced by somebody new in the new government. So she's basically a lame duck. And what does she do? She gets Tom Cruise over to pin a medal on him. And Johnny pointed out it wasn't even on their schedule. So apparently it was this last second all of a sudden thing so that Tom didn't even have time to put something decent on. I mean, the whole thing is just a joke.
Wow.
So that's the
Wow.
first part about, and then he's been in all these venues, why, well, it turns out he's preparing for this big stunt at the closing ceremony. That's the second story that came out this week. He's preparing for this big stunt in the closing ceremonies, and what Deadline and TMZ are reporting is that at the end of this Paris 2024 games, they're going to hand over the Olympic flag to the next city, which is Los Angeles in 2028. And so Tom is going to rappel from the top of the stadium there for the closing ceremony, Stade de France. He's going to rappel down, take the flag, and then they've pre-recorded footage of him flying it to LA and jumping out of an airplane onto the Hollywood sign. Apparently they filmed that back in March. And everyone's agog. It's like, oh, Tom Cruise is going to, death-defying stunt. He does his own stunts. Yay, Tom Cruise. I'm like, hang on, wait a minute. When the Olympic flag is handed over, it's the mayor of this games handing it over to the mayor of the next games. And they've already confirmed this. Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, will be handing over that flag to Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles. Now, I wanted to remind people about Karen Bass's history with Scientology, and that is when she was a member of the Assembly in 2010 in Los Angeles, she showed up as one of the shills for the grand opening of the Los Angeles Scientology Ideal Org. And there's footage of her giving her little speech, yay, Scientology. Years later, in 2020, when Joe Biden was preparing to become the Democratic nominee for president, and of course, just like now, everyone's wondering who was he going to choose for his vice presidential candidate. Kamala's trying to pick hers. Joe Biden, there was a short list of people that might have, Kamala Harris was one of them, of course, but one of them was Karen Bass. She had been a long time, she was a state assembly member. She was a congresswoman from Los Angeles. And so, supposedly Joe Biden was considering her. Well, then Breitbart, the conservative publication, brought out that 2010 footage and saying, really, Joe Biden's going to choose this woman that was given a speech for the Scientologists? And it became this big thing. And Karen Bass's response was, Well, I only went to that because it was in my district. Well, I actually went back and looked up the maps and realized it wasn't in her district. And I published that story, and she had to change. She had to say, then she came out and said, "Oh, that's right. A staffer of mine wrote that. That's not actually true. I just, and so it was just an ugly, stupid incident that she handled very badly. Since then, when she ran for mayor in 2022, she was very strongly denouncing Scientology. She and Rick Caruso got into a fight over who could say the most bad things about Scientology. Now, Dave Miscavige, he spent millions on this huge media campaign in LA. So that's the background. Karen Bass says now it was a mistake. She went to that Scientology opening. She's very strongly against Scientology. She has vowed to help Mike Rinder and Leah Remini with their things. So I'm thinking, okay, that Karen Bass is going to be accepting the Olympic flag and then what? Handing it to Tom Cruise? Because the only way Tom Cruise gets that Olympic flag and then does his stunt and everything is if she's in on it.
Yep.
So she's now supposedly critical of Scientology, but she's going to work out this stunt with Scientology's chief ornament, Tom Cruise.
But it's Tom Cruise.
I guess that's all anybody says, right, Chris?
Pretty much. And I'm going to say it's the moral low ground. It is a good question. Tom Cruise should not be doing this. This should not be happening. Karen Bass was right for putting Scientology, in a negative light. That's where it belongs. Public figures should be saying that, And so, what a coup for Scientology they're thinking right now, I am sure, to put her in this position and have their biggest gun come and, in your face, right? I'm sure that's how they're thinking about it. We should. I'm really glad you're pointing this out because we need to be watching this kind of thing with open eyes.
I mean, I've been on my bike, Chris. I don't even know if anybody else has picked that up. I just immediately thought of that. I realized, and I double checked. Yes, Anne Hidalgo is going to hand the flag to Karen Bass. So then, if Tom Cruise rappels down and takes off with it, Karen Bass has got to be part of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Did somebody not point out to her that once again she's doing Scientology a favor?
The world we live in, huh? All I will say is, cultic influence is all around. If you just open your eyes, right? It's out there. And for such a pipsqueak operation, they really do seem to insert themselves into the wildest places, don't they, Scientology?
Yes.
It really is something. Okay, folks. Well, something else for you to think about. And like we said, also on the legal front, actually call to action here, right? Contact your representatives, contact your people, make some noise about the fact that this arbitration stuff is still a huge, huge problem. Until we get some legislators doing something about this, it's not going to go away. And Scientology and unfortunately other cults are going to start getting a free pass on this because they're going to start doing it too. So, all right. Tony, any sort of, I know you're out there and about right now. Anything on this week?
Well, I'm hoping something I did for a magazine is finally going to come out very soon. So I'll let everybody know where it is. But yeah, that's something I've been working on quite a while. And I think I think I mentioned to you, we're going to take things a little new direction. I hope people like it.
Excellent. Okay. Well, something to look forward to. And folks out there, of course, if you like the show, think, we're doing something good here, like, subscribe, share, get this content out there. Scientology is still a thing. Cults out there, still a thing. We need to make people aware of this. And as far as I know, our weekly wrap up here is pretty much the most concise breakdown of what the church is really up to these days. So there you go. See you guys next week. Bye-bye.